little bit of a change of scenery today so I'm not blinding you. So, I mentioned in my last video how I am going to be switching jobs. And my new job is taking me into a field that I've never worked in before. Actually, I've never worked in an environment like this before because it deals with psychology. And I had my second day of training yesterday, and they touched on different kinds of mental conditions that I'm going to be dealing with on a daily basis. And one of them was schizophrenia and mania and things like that. And with schizophrenia, they touched on hallucinations, hearing voices, and things like that. And a lot of those things and sensitivity kind of sounds similar. Seeing things that nobody else sees, hearing things that nobody else hears, voices in your head, all of that. So it had me for but a few moments questioning, my own sanity. And don't you spinners hate that when your yarn just breaks? Sadness. We can fix it though. And I'm going through all of these signs and symptoms in my head and diagnoses and all of this stuff. And then I'm thinking, well, no. Their sensitivity and schizophrenia are not the same because you have some validating experiences. And this is where my workplace is going to come into play rather deeply, because the warehouse I'm at, that I was at, Monday was my last day, yay! The warehouse I was at, it was rather active in paranormal things, and the first thing I want to talk about today is forklift ghosts. Now, I have been at this warehouse since before it even went live. I've been there before the conveyors were put in. I was there as a deterrent to shoo people away from coming into the warehouse and seeing what was going on. Not really coming in, but like snooping around, seeing what was going on, things of that nature. And I started noticing some things while I was there, before anybody else was. Like the fact that sometimes at night I would hear a forklift. Now keep in mind, the only other person in this building was a guard at the completely other end of the building. And there were no forklifts in here yet. There weren't any there. Didn't happen yet. So I started wondering why I was hearing this from the other side of the building and things like that. And I'd go over and I'd check with the other guard and see if, there was anything going on. And that other guard would say that these things just happened at night sometimes. Well, as time went on and as people began to be there more, workers starting to come in, things of that nature, I learned that this particular warehouse had been a foods warehouse before. And what had occurred, I should say, what had occurred is that there was a man that worked there. And these were, before OSHA had any say in what was going on in these warehouses. So you would have locations from floor to ceiling, but they didn't have the proper lift equipment to raise people from floor to ceiling. So what they would do is they would lift these people in these metal cages on the end of the forks of a forklift. Well, one of the welds on this metal cage happened to be faulty, and this man fell from the ceiling of a rather high ceilinged warehouse to his death. And what we figured out is that on occasion, or every night, but nobody really notices it every night, honestly, this man would kind of relive the night of his death. That's what we think. It's either that or he's stuck in a loop of work because the location he fell out is on the other side of the building. And there have been associates that report that they thought they ran over somebody laying on the floor. Same spot every time. But when they went to check under their forks or under their equipment or anything like that, there's nobody there. They literally thought they ran over another associate, and there's nobody there. And as they put in the camera systems, and as I became a supervisor and had access to these systems, I noticed sometimes, one night in particular, when there were only 2 supervisors in the building, and those were the last 2 there, and it was a Friday night, and everybody had gone home, and there was no third shift coming in. And I'm watching these 2 on one of the dog cameras. And on the other side of the building, I pan over to those cameras to make sure nobody else is here. And they had actually been on the dock, and I see a forklift drive by on the other side of the building that is the complete different color of their forklifts. And I radio out and make sure they're the only ones in the building, and they're like, yeah, we're the only 2 here. We don't know what you're talking about. There's no forklift over there. And that for me was a validating experience. And, to hear people say, oh, we heard this forklift, or we thought we ran over somebody, that to me is a validating experience that I am not schizophrenic. Now, I'm not saying that schizophrenic people are bad. I know people live with mental illness every day, and that's part of the reason I wanted to switch to a field where I'm more helping to those people. I wanted to do something more validating. And another validating experience is another girl ghost in that warehouse that's actually rather sad. I had been working a special project in the back where we needed a guard in the back, and I heard this giggling, and then I was touched. And for me, being touched is when I get a person's story after their death. They will, give me clips and things as to how they died, what happened. And this little girl, she was dressed in like this sack dress, and she had one red shoe on, and she always played with a ball. She was always playing with a ball. Or she was touching associates. Associates kept saying, they heard giggling, but nobody was there. Or somebody was tugging on like the hem of their shirt or something like that. And she was about waist height to most average people. So, these were validating things. And her story is that, and I've done some research as well, to show that during the 30s and during the Depression, that the warehouse I work at was actually homeless shanties. It was pretty much a tent community, and they had this little girl in her experience to me, had died looking for her mother. Her mother had gone somewhere one day and never come back. And, if you look at stories of the Depression, there were children that were abandoned during it. And this little girl had no idea what to do. She's all of maybe 4 years old. and nobody took care of her, and everybody just kind of ignored her. She starved to death. And another validating thing for us and for me and for some of my other guards that have seen her, because these guards had reported to me a couple of times that there was a little girl playing in the yard with a ball, but they had turned around and she wasn't there anymore. This little girl playing with a ball had just disappeared, and they describe her as, she had this red shoe on, but I couldn't see the other shoe, and she was playing with this ball, and she was just there, and then she wasn't. And that was a validating thing that, yes, this was the little girl that I had been seeing. And the third and final thing that I want to talk about as a validation of, am I seeing dead people or am I schizophrenic, is help me ghost. Because another symptom of schizophrenia is to hear voices. And there is no way to explain this particular amount of group mania. These occurrences don't happen the same day or things like that. These are things that over time I am as third shift security supervisor, I'm grabbing onto and I'm holding onto and I'm writing them down and I'm making sure that, things line up before I add them into my pile of holy shit paranormal experiences while at work. So the last one I want to talk about today is Help Me Ghosts. Help Me Ghost is one that I personally actually did not experience, which is rare, but it does happen. And it happened in the warehouse. And Help Me Ghost, we had dubbed that because nobody actually ever saw it. The first time it happened, this thing was banging on the inside of a trailer like he wanted to get out. Help me. And my guard in the yard said, hey, we think somebody's in the trailer in such and such a door. We think there's a worker still in there. There's somebody in there. Can you radio to shipping and see if they can get that person out? Because this person was banging on the inside of the trailer and screaming, help me, I'm still in here, help me. And they had actually opened the trailer up, saw that there was nobody in there, thought my guard was crazy. And, it happens. Well, they thought that was crazy until the one night there were two supervisors cleaning up RF guns in a cage, in the RF cage. And they were the last two people in the building. Again, it was one of those instances where there were only two people there on a Friday night. And I wasn't even there on a Friday night because I, on lucky occasions, had Friday nights off. By the way, isn't this spindle pretty? Oh, it spins so nice. Anyway, and these two supervisors hear from the middle of the warehouse somebody screaming their head off. Help me. I'm still in here. Help me. I can't get out. And that to me is frightening. Because it came from the very middle of the warehouse. And these supervisors went and they searched everywhere for this person that was screaming for help because they thought that a pallet had fallen on them or something. But there was nothing there. And that following Monday, when I came in, these same two supervisors came up to me because I had been doing my own little paranormal investigation, gather people's experiences, Some people knew that I saw these things, my guards especially, and my guards being themselves were, after hearing this experience on that particular Friday, my weekend guy said, well, if you want to know about this place and its hauntings, talk to my supervisor. So that Monday they came to me and they told me about their experience. And they were like, "Well, how often does this stuff go on?" And I'm like, "All the time. This place is a very active place. It's just people are working and they don't notice it as much. And when people do notice it, they start to question their own sanity." So, paranormal experiences and insanity are two different things, and my heart goes out to people with mental illnesses every day because there could be times when the paranormal and mental illness collide. And, the voices in your head may be things trying to get in. Because I know people are particularly susceptible to these things when you add a mental, I, I don't want to call it a weakness, but an illness. Ill people are more susceptible to attack. And I question, kind of how how can you separate attack from mania? And that to me is something interesting more that I want to look more into. So comment down below and tell me, if you think this is something I should make a completely separate video about and start a research thing where I look more into mania versus paranormal experience and talk about that. But that's all for today. I actually have to get ready for work. Yes, I'm talking to you in my jams. Deal with it. Deal with it. Have a nice day, everybody, and please subscribe. Bye.